Childhood in the United Kingdom during the 1980s was not quiet, simple, or easy to forget. It was loud, awkward, colourful, and filled with moments that only make sense if you were there. The world was changing. Music, television, fashion, even the food on your plate. But as kids, we only cared about what time Going Live started and whether we had enough Panini stickers to finish the album. These are not just memories. They are fragments of a childhood shaped by cassette tapes, neon shell suits, and playground dares. Moments where boredom gave birth to creativity, and life was measured in streetlights, school milk, and the sound of rewinding tapes. Today, we are going back to those years you thought you had forgotten. Let's remember them together. Woolworths was more than a shop. For kids in the 1980s, it was the closest thing to a treasure trove you could find on a high street. You went there for toys, for sweets, for records, and for that glorious pick and mix section. Rows of coloured sweets gleamed behind glass, daring you to choose. Every visit felt like a small adventure. You would press your nose to the counters, count out your coins, and hope you had enough for just one more cola bottle or white chocolate mouse. It was a place where 5 pence felt like riches, and time seemed to stand still while you made your choices. Leaving Woolworths meant leaving with a small paper bag and a big smile. It was not just shopping, it was a ritual, one you shared with friends, with parents, with Saturday afternoons that smelled of sugar and freedom. Saturday mornings in the 80s belonged to you, your cereal, and the television. Going Live was not just a program. It was a gateway to chaos, cartoons, and celebrities who seemed larger than life. You did not need plans when Philip Schofield and Gordon the Gopher were on screen. The living room became your kingdom for those hours. You laughed, you shouted at the screen, and you felt part of something bigger than your sleepy street. These shows connected you to thousands of other kids watching exactly the same thing. When the credits rolled, the magic ended. You turned off the television knowing Monday's conversations would begin here. Did you see what happened on Saturday? It was how weekends were supposed to feel. School milk was not glamorous, but it was part of growing up. Those tiny glass bottles arrived every day in blue plastic crates, warm from sitting in the corridor too long. A classmate handed them out with pride, like they held something precious. You drank it because it was expected. Not because it tasted good, but because the teacher watched, and no one wanted to be the one who refused. That lukewarm, slightly sour milk was part of the school routine, as familiar as handwriting practice or singing hymns. For all its flaws, it gave a strange sense of order. It tied you to every other child in Britain who lined up for milk, pulled off the silver lid, and drank in silence. A generation united by crates and bottles. Gaming in the 80s was an exercise in patience. The ZX Spectrum did not load quickly, and you learned to live with the screeches, beeps, and blinking stripes. Sometimes it failed and you started all over again. That wait became part of the experience. You sat on the floor, eyes fixed on the television, willing those pixels to behave. When it finally worked, you felt victorious, ready to guide your pixelated character through impossible challenges. Those blocky graphics and tinny sounds were magic. They transported you to worlds your imagination had to finish building long before graphics cards did the job for you. Slow, clunky, but unforgettable. The Rubiks Cube was in every home, even if no one knew how to solve it. It sat on coffee tables, classroom desks, and bedroom shelves, half finished and quietly mocking you. Everyone had their own method. None of them worked. You twisted and turned, convinced this time you would crack the code, but frustration always arrived faster than success, and sooner or later you abandoned it again. It became less of a puzzle, more of a companion to your childhood. Even scrambled, it felt important. It represented effort, determination, and the simple belief that somehow, someone out there must know the answer. Maybe one day, you told yourself, you would too. Some afternoons had a taste. Fish finger sandwiches meant home, comfort, and television with the volume too high, bread as white as the plates, ketchup in thick blobs, and fingers dipped into crumbs between mouthfuls. You never questioned it. This was not about fine dining, it was about routine, warmth, and filling your stomach before homework or bedtime battles. School uniforms stayed on, shoes sometimes kicked off, but this part of the day was yours. That taste still lingers now. It belongs to evenings when the world outside stopped mattering, and the biggest decision left was what cartoon to watch after tea. Simple food, simple happiness. Margaret Thatcher seemed to be on television every day. For a child, she was less a politician, more a sign that the news had started and your cartoons had ended. Her voice, her face, her name, they were part of the background noise of growing up. Parents argued, grown-ups watched, and children rolled their eyes. You knew enough to know you didn't want to know. You waited until the news was over and the television returned to something that mattered more. Politics felt like a world away. But even now, you cannot think of the 80s without hearing her name or picturing her on screen. A generation raised under headlines and speeches they barely understood. Before the internet, holidays began with a television screen. CFAX and teletext promised destinations in blocky text and blurry images. Parents read numbers aloud, scribbled down codes, and planned your summer from the sofa. You watched over their shoulders, imagining beaches, swimming pools, and hotel breakfasts. It was not glamorous, but it sparked dreams all the same. Your first glimpse of adventure lived in blue and yellow pages, not glossy brochures. Even now, those flickering screens feel like childhood. The promise of something different, somewhere sunny, somewhere new, all hiding behind numbers on a clunky remote control. Travel started at home. Teenage bedrooms told stories without words, posters from smash hits. Magazine turned walls into statements of identity. Madonna, Duran Duran, A-ha, faces stuck with blue tack, dreams pinned between corners of peeling wallpaper. Every inch of wall space mattered. Your heroes watched over you while you did homework, made mixtapes, and wondered about the future. Your taste, your tribe, your soundtrack, all there in glossy colour. Tearing them down meant growing up. But for a while, those posters turned bedrooms into kingdoms. Spaces where you ruled, at least until dinner time. Thursday nights were sacred. Top of the pops meant battles over the remote, arguments with siblings, and negotiations with parents about bedtime. Winning meant 30 minutes of music, fashion, and glimpses of another world. When the show started, nothing else mattered. You mimed the songs, judged the outfits, and rooted for your favourites to climb the charts. It was more than television. It was connection, culture, and countdown. Even now, those performances linger. Neon lights, fog machines, awkward dancing, a weekly ritual that defined a generation's Thursday nights. Music felt bigger when you had to fight for it. School playgrounds in the 80s were not designed with kindness in mind. Concrete, metal, and rain seemed to be the only building materials considered. Slides were scorching hot in summer, freezing cold in winter, and bruises were simply part of growing up. No one talked about health and safety. Scraped knees, ripped trousers, and the occasional chipped tooth were all badges of honour. Teachers watched from afar, only intervening when things got really out of hand. Still, these grey playgrounds were where friendships formed, games were invented, and dares were accepted. They were places where you learned resilience long before the word existed in school assemblies. Shell suits were loud, visually and literally. The swish-swish sound of nylon trousers was the soundtrack of playgrounds and parks across Britain. Neon colours clashed on tracksuits, trainers and headbands with absolutely no shame. These outfits were more than fashion. They were statements of identity. You wore them for PE, for after school, for hanging around shopping centres with mates. Looking back, the colours seem ridiculous. At the time, they felt invincible. Photos from that era now live on in family albums as a warning or a joke. But to those who wore them, they were proof you belonged to the decade of bold choices. Panini football sticker albums ruled school playgrounds. Swaps were intense, friendships tested, and deals struck with all the seriousness of world trade agreements. Completing your album felt like winning a small personal World Cup. Certain stickers became legendary. Everyone wanted that elusive, shiny badge or a player no one else seemed to have. You carried your stack with pride, ready for negotiations during break time. The ritual of collecting, swapping, and sticking never got old. It was not just about football, it was about being part of something bigger than yourself. Your album held more than stickers. It held your reputation. Learning to write neatly was serious business. Fountain pens leaked ink, stained hands, and punished mistakes with smudges impossible to hide. Perfecting your joined-up writing became a rite of passage in classrooms across Britain. Teachers inspected every loop and curl like art critics. Pen licenses were a source of pride, something to show off once you had earned the right to swap pencil for ink. A perfect page was a rare but glorious victory. These lessons taught patience, precision, and how to press just hard enough without tearing the page. Neat handwriting meant you were growing up, one careful letter at a time. Blue Peter was more than a television show. It was a masterclass in creativity, imagination, and making things from yogurt pots and sticky back plastic. Every craft promised fun, even if yours never quite looked like the one on screen. You saved cereal boxes, toilet rolls, and washing up liquid bottles, just in case inspiration struck. Glue, glitter, and string became your tools of invention after every episode. Sometimes your creations worked. Sometimes they ended in disaster. But you kept trying because Blue Peter made you believe anything could be built at home. It turned every child into an inventor, one craft project at a time. Getting up at 6 in the morning was a rite of passage. Paper rounds taught responsibility, independence, and the value of freezing fingers gripping rubber bands. The streets were silent, except for the sound of newspapers hitting doorsteps. Some mornings were tougher than others. Rain, snow, or fog did not cancel deliveries, and neither did exhaustion from staying up too late. You learned resilience the hard way, with a heavy bag slung over your shoulder. That weekly envelope of coins made it worth it. Your first taste of earning money brought a pride no part-time job since has quite matched. Cassettes were fragile and rewinding was an art form. When the tape unspooled, you did not panic. You found a pencil, slotted it in and turned, slowly, carefully, until your music came back to life. It became second nature. Twisting by hand saved your favourite mixtapes, chart countdowns recorded off the radio, and gifts from friends. Rewinding was part of the ritual, part of the patience needed to enjoy music then. No playlist will ever recreate that feeling. Music was something you worked for, something you fixed, something you made your own with time and effort. Television in the 80s demanded planning. Recording your favourite show meant hovering by the VHS, finger poised on the record button. Miss it, and you missed it forever. Timing was everything. You prayed no one would change the channel mid-recording or talk over your precious soundtrack. VHS tapes were rewound, reused, and carefully labelled in thick black marker. Those tapes became archives of childhood. A collection of cartoons, music videos, and moments frozen in flickering static. More precious than any subscription service today. Playing out until the streetlights came on was the universal rule. No phones, no texts, just instincts and an eye on the sky. Freedom lasted until the first orange glow buzzed into life above the pavement. Games ended mid-sentence, bikes turned for home, and goodbyes were shouted over shoulders. You learned to read the light, to know your time was almost up without needing a watch. Those hours spent outside were golden. They taught independence, adventure, and how to stretch every last minute before heading home. Childhood counted in streetlights. What did the streetlights mean to you growing up? Public information films in the 80s were terrifying. Short, serious, and packed with doom, they warned children of everything from electricity pylons to strangers. Their messages were blunt, their tone unforgettable. These films stuck with you. Images of danger, narrated in calm but chilling voices, stayed long after the credits ended. They shaped your fears as much as your actions. They worked because they scared you. Long before viral videos, these films taught caution, survival, and a healthy respect for railway tracks. Fear, it turned out, was effective education. Growing up in the United Kingdom during the 1980s was more than just surviving bad fashion and strange television. It was about building memories in a world without smartphones, where boredom was solved with imagination and adventure began the moment you stepped outside. These moments shaped who we became, in playgrounds, on paper rounds, with cassette tapes, and through the glow of the television screen. We carry these memories, not because they were perfect, but because they were ours. If these stories brought a smile, a laugh, or a sense of, I remember that, subscribe for more journeys back to the decades that shaped us.